All right, here we are. This is Jay Brown Yoga Talks podcast. My name is Jay Brown, and I would like to welcome you, whoever you are, whether you are a new listener or a returning friend. It means a lot that you've decided to listen, and I greatly appreciate it. I hope this moment is finding you reasonably well. How are you holding up against life's uncertainty in this moment? Maybe just take a moment to check in. Listen to it. Listen to this moment as you sit and hear and listen to this. Or maybe you're not sitting. Maybe you're driving or you're running. I don't know what you're doing, but take a moment to listen to the moment that you are listening to this. Do you feel that you, of late, have been able to navigate the currents and eddies of life, or are you feeling dashed about? Either way, in this moment, as you listen to this, I wish to propose to you that on some level, there's no problem. And I imagine there's all kinds of problems that we're dealing with, but on some level, in this moment, there's an underlying note, an underlying sound, if you will, that runs through it all. And I find that if I can quiet myself enough, I can hear it. Can you? If you were here last week, I was saying, and I'm sitting here thinking it again, that I'm completely stunned at how quickly this year has gone by. Can't believe it. And I have a plan to, in I think 2 weeks, do like the year-end check-in that I do. So long-time listeners know at the end of the year, I always kind of just do a solo episode. And I have a plan to do it. I've been taking some notes on some things that I wanted to update you all on with the center and all kinds of stuff. But in lieu of the whole check-in, there's two things that I was thinking of today that are relevant to today's conversation with Lucy Crisfield. I've been thinking a lot about this phrase that I have often used on this show where I say, bringing yoga into the mainstream. And I once wrote a blog post that I pondered this, and I've been pondering it again, that I don't know if that ever really happened. I always say it got mainstreamed, but I don't think it ever really got mainstreamed. Some representation of yoga or something that was being called yoga, but is definitely not what I'm doing now, got mainstreamed and scaled. But what I'm doing now as a yoga teacher, and what I think maybe even a lot of people listening to this are doing, it's really not a mainstream thing. Maybe if you're doing certain approaches that appeal to a more mainstream sensibility, that might be the case, but if you're somebody who's doing something that's more of a therapeutic orientation, or you're engaging in a much subtler practice that isn't about fitness, or even about, it's like strict biomechanics, or maybe it has something to do with biomechanics. I don't know. I don't want to get into that, but if you're doing a type of practice that's more of like a somatic exploratory thing, or definitely if it's much more of a spiritual orientation or like a therapeutic orientation, I don't think it's all that mainstream, even though people's doctors will say, hey, you should try yoga. The reality of subtle approaches in yoga challenge deeply held sensibilities that we hold. Like, that's the nature of transformational practice of yoga. It actually does challenge what we would call mainstream. I don't think you can mainstream it in some way. And so I've been thinking a lot about the niche that is this yoga that I'm doing. And I've been observing who's been coming into the center, because the people who are coming in know that they're not coming in for fitness. I've made that really clear. seems like people are coming in because of the word gentle. That's what I'm calling the class Gentle Flow. And then I have a description for it that says something about personal breath-centered practice that adapts to individual needs, including chronic or acute conditions. And I specifically put that last part in there because I want people who've got like stuff going on, who've had surgeries or who've got conditions that they're dealing with to feel like they could come. That I know from a lot of the people I've spoken to who've been to the center have said to me that they tried to go to other classes and they just couldn't do them. The classes just were too much for them, or the classes didn't allow for the kind of adapting that they required. Or I would say the underlying focus of the practice or purpose of the practice was different, but that's another conversation. In any case, I was having a conversation with this older couple that's been coming to the center quite often. Linda and Joe, they're really great. I really like them. They're wonderful people, and they've been coming regularly since I opened. And I was chatting with Linda after class and trying to get a sense from her of what it is about the class that she's enjoying and, just kind of getting a feel from her, like to see if I could get some feedback. And she specifically mentioned, and she's not the first person, that they really enjoyed the chanting and that they had never had a teacher who did chanting with them. And in not so many words, what I got from her was that the chanting created a feeling in the room, like a certain something that felt good, that felt really relaxing. And I just took note of that. The chanting is able to communicate something or invite something in an unspoken way. It's a non-verbal communication or sharing. Even though they haven't chanted, like one or two people have started to chant with me. Like I invite people to chant. It's not call or response. I just chant and I invite people to chant along with me if they want. And sometimes people know it and they do, or sometimes people just do the ohms with me because I am inviting them. And one or two people have started, which is pretty cool. But most folks just listen. And even just listening and having it happen in the room seems to have an impact. So the timing is perfect that this is what I've been reflecting on right in the moment when I finally hooked up with my guest today, Lucy Crisfield. We have been trying to get together for some time, and it finally happened right now when I've been thinking about chanting, and she is the perfect person for me to talk to about this. I'm not going to say much more about it. I do talk about how we were brought together and the reasons why she's on the show with her when we get started. But just to say that Lucy is someone who has experienced chanting in Sanskrit from both of the practitioner and the scholar side, like from the felt, more traditional way of studying it, as well as a more like academic translation and study of philology and all of that. So she has moved through that scholar practitioner spectrum, and it was really great to connect with her on the nature and power of sound and mantra. So very cool to have had this chance to speak with her, and it is my pleasure to be bringing it to you today. Real quick before we get to it, let me mention that if you enjoy the show and you would like to connect with me in other ways outside of just listening, there's lots of opportunities for us to do that. I have ongoing live classes. I've got a weekly discussion group. I have on-demand continuing education and a teacher training program. Or maybe you'd like to get into the full-length archives and become a supporter with a podcast premium subscription. All of my stuff can be found at jbrownyoga.com. Okay, y'all, I'm going to just leave it there. I will touch base with you on the other side, but let's go ahead and get to it. Let's listen to this conversation that I had with Lucy Crisfield. Hello?
Hi.
Hi, Lucy.
Hi. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you. Nice to meet you. Pleasure to make your acquaintance.
Yeah, you too. Thanks for, luckily it's all good and I'm here.
Oh, I'm so happy for that. I am already recording, and if it's okay with you, I want us to consider ourselves having just begun. Is that okay?
Okay, sure.
Yeah, I don't want to make a big formal intro. I want it to just be the conversation that we're having in the real moment that we're having it. In the past, I never used to say anything, but then all kinds of stuff came up where people were surprised by that. And then I don't want people to be surprised by it.
Yeah. Sure. Perfect.
Cool. Well, I'm really glad to have this moment. Let me shout out the person who brings us together, because it was a listener of the show who told me about you. Her name was Mandy. So Mandy, If you're listening, thanks to you. And as I was getting ready to speak with you, I could see why she thought I might want to have you on the show, because she's a regular listener and there's a number of things that I have like personal interest in and that I bring people on to talk about on the show. And a lot of those things all seem to kind of converge some in your work. So very cool. And I guess I'm curious to get us started here, because there are a lot of parallels. I know you spent time at the KYM, and I actually just recently had Nritya, the director, on the show. And then I also had a few weeks earlier, Sheila and Ravi Shankar. Sheila teaches chanting at the Mandirum right now too.
Okay.
So we've had some conversations where I've kind of explored some things. I've also had a bunch of people on in the past, like more scholarly folks like SOAS people, to talk about all the work that's being done with the scholarship and the translation editions and how the manuscripts. So we've have some background for regular listeners on some stuff.
Okay.
You seem to stride many worlds.
Yeah, maybe I do.
Well, just from the looks of what I could see or learn online.
Yeah.
And before we get into the many worlds of like Sanskrit and chanting, though, my curiosity to get us started is I did take note that you did explore other things like Arabic and the Quran and Hebrew chanting. And I guess I'm sort of curious, did that happen before or after you started studying it?
Actually, it was the Quran that started my journey. Yeah. I was a kind of quite almost raving, is that the word? A raving atheist, you could say. And I found myself, I think I was about 24 or something. Not raving atheist, but I've been brought up in that way. And I started yoga when I was, 23 or something. And then quite soon I just knew I was working at the BBC at the time at Radio 3, which is the kind of classical music station. So I'd finally, having spent a year in South America previously, I'd kind of got a proper job, so to speak. And I came to the end of like a contract there at the BBC and they were going to renew it in like 3 weeks' time. So I was like, okay, so in those 3 weeks, I'm going to go to India. But the plane to India went via Jordan. And when I arrived in Jordan, before I got on the plane, I was like, maybe I should just get off the plane in Amman and see what that's like. So I got off, and one thing led to another. I ended up quitting the job at the BBC. I ended up enrolling in the University of Damascus, living in Damascus with a Muslim family next to the Umayyad Mosque, studying Arabic, and just hearing the call to prayer. 5 times a day.
Was that what it is? That was going to be my question. Like, what was it that would say, let go of this whole other life and spend time in this other culture and this other thing? It was the call to prayer?
And the sound. Yeah, it was that sound, which at the time, and I was still questioning it, and that I found a kind of local imam, and I was kind of going and like every day and going through those little alleyways in Old Town Damascus. There are no cars. I mean, it's just the most evocative place. Obviously, a lot has happened there since when I was there. But even then it was tense as well. And I was questioning this imam and what, and it was just a very alive time of exploration. Anyway, various things happened. I ended up having to finally leave to go to India. So I think I spent 3 or 4 months in the end in that area, ending in Israel and Jerusalem. Arrived in India straight to Rishikesh, and then I spent 1.5 years there. So I was away for 2 years. My 3-week trip ended up becoming 2 years, quitting everything while I was away. And I actually I remember seeing Sanskrit when I first arrived in Rishikesh and thinking, oh, there's no way I want to do that. Like, there's no way I want to do that. I just want to do yoga. And I had to seriously do a lot of physical yoga because I was in such a mess, I wasn't ready for Sanskrit. So I did really, really intense yoga. I had a breakdown, which is what I needed to do.
Wait a second. You're skipping over a bunch of stuff first.
Oh, well,
and the reason why I want to spend a little bit of time here just to say is because for me, this kind of is the context in which your viewpoint on some of the other questions I have comes from. So I always do this with people. And so first question I would have is, how much time did you spend in Damascus before going to India?
I spent a few months.
And
2-3 months.
When you left to go to India, did you not have any attachment like to being an Islam or a Muslim, or like, what was your relationship to the prayers that you were participating in, or what was your relationship? Because you said it was the call to prayer that kept you there. Were you participating in praying and doing the rituals of being in that religion?
Not at that time. I did later end up enrolling in a Quranic school in London, and there I was. But at that time, I was not ready to start praying or anything. It was just more like, it was like awakening some kind of, I'd already started yoga in London, which is what drew me towards India, so I was already it was just the beginning of this kind of connection to something deeply profound that I hadn't.
I see. And you were on your way to India anyways. You just kind of stopped over for a time.
Yeah.
Got you. All right. Well, I also had quite an experience going to Rishikesh in 1998. I was only there in Rishikesh. I was in India for a month, but I was in Rishikesh for maybe 2 weeks.
Yeah.
In Laxmanjula, if I recall. Yeah,
that's where I was. Yep.
That little place with the little bridge there, and there was one side and the other side.
Yeah. And right at the end, Vednikatan. That's
yes. And every morning there would be chanting when the sun was coming up, and every morning the chanting would go on, and the speakers, very powerful experience to just be there along the river there.
Oh yeah. Again, just the sound, just emanating wherever you are, a different sound to the sound in Syria, but nonetheless, compared to, England, when you're, you might get a bit of very different sounds coming out, not this evocative, it's just kind of, it was mesmerizing for me at that time.
All right. Me too. Now, when I went, I didn't go to study yoga. I had been doing all this yoga study for a couple years in New York City before I went there. And I was looking for a guru, and I didn't exactly find one. I did meet a really awesome teacher in Rishikesh. But I guess I'm curious, were you going to study with a particular teacher? And also, you mentioned you had done yoga before. Were you kind of coming from a particular style or tradition, or what had been your experience of practice?
Yeah, I was 100% Bikram.
Okay.
That's what got me in. Nothing.
There's no Bikram ashram in Rishikesh, though.
No, I know. It was basically, I was either going to go do the Bikram training in America, in the US, or I was going to go to India. Thank God.
You made a good choice. Yeah,
I was so into the Bikram because I was coming from, I was in a very, very intense place, and I needed hard, intense sweating.
I heard you were like a clubber and you were on cocaine the first time you went to class, if I heard correct,
true. The first yoga class I went to, I went straight from.
So just people know where you were coming from, which I've heard that report too, that Bikram actually has helped other people I know. And I've kind of scoffed at Bikram at times, and there's reasons to scoff at it depending, but it certainly served a purpose for a lot of people, and it seems like it did for you.
Absolutely. There's no way. Where I ended up, with these KYM, Krishnamacharya Yoga Mandirum yoga movements. It was like, I could not have literally done this, 6-7 years ago when I was at that time. But yeah, from Bikram, I knew I wanted heart, like Ashtanga Iyengar, so I was just, and I didn't know, I wasn't going for someone particular. I just knew Rishikesh. I think because I'd already spent a year in South America before, I was kind of in the travel mode of just turn up and see what happens kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And, I found an Iyengar teacher in Rishikesh who I spent a few months with, but the big teacher was not a yoga teacher, was someone in Auroville. Again, I landed in India as the tsunami happened, and I was planning to go to Mumbai, but then I bumped into some students in the street of Delhi who were kind of collecting money for people, who down south. And so I ended up staying with them and helping them. And then they got free flights down to Chennai to go and help in the villages. So I kind of went along with them. And then we were just next to Auroville. And I'd been told about Auroville the first time, which is a community in the south of India. Again, also one of the first days I arrived in India, and I'd immediately said, there's no way I want to go there. That's just for Westerners, I want to go to real India. And anyway, here I was, found myself in Auroville. And I ended up staying over 6 months. Yeah. And then I went back and spent another 3-4 months. So I spent almost a year.
So what kept you there? What was Auroville's appeal? Why did you stay for 6 months?
Because of a man I met.
Fair. Come on, fair. Yeah. You were in your 20s, right? Exactly.
Well, he was much older than me, and he was kind of like a teacher person. Anyway, he really helped reveal a lot of things that were going on for me. He was a psychotherapist analyst person, and he just poured a lot of energy into me, and that's what I needed help to see some things, and he helped me with that. Yeah.
Okay. And then at some point you were ready to move on from that, I guess?
Well, no, I actually collapsed and wasn't able to move for 2 months. Yeah.
What was that about? What?
Well, I probably won't say the story.
Okay, that's fair. I don't mean to get into anything you don't want to talk about. Please.
Yeah. So basically, it was just a pretty extraordinary way out story. But I had an experience of, I was doing a handstand that morning, and that afternoon nothing physically happened, but just something released in my memory, and then I didn't stand up for 2 months, and yeah, and then that was when I realized I'd come to the end of that. I just had to get strong enough to get home. Like, there was no more, after 2 years, I'd been away 2 years, there was nothing more India could offer me. Like, this was its final gift.
That was the message. That was the message. You're done. You're done here.
Yeah, you now just need to recover from this. And it took me about 4 or 5 years to come back to kind of strength after that. Yeah.
And do you feel that the inquiry and practice and travel you were doing was depleting? It was depleting you.
Oh, no. It wasn't depleting. It's what it was what enabled that to happen. It was a rebirthing. It was like the old needed to kind of crack open for the new to come through. It was like an amazing experience. I mean, obviously it was very intense in the moment, but because I'd done a few vipassanas, and I was doing a lot of meditation, big practice every day, and Reiki, and so I was able to hold the experience. And that's why the experience was able to happen. Otherwise, the body, I would have just got some mystery illness at a later point in life, is what I feel.
So I've had other people come on and talk about kind of like Kundalini awakening experiences that they've had. Are you putting this in that kind of category, or is this more of like trauma experience, trauma stuff coming up?
Yeah, to be just let go of, being released through the system. It's like, okay, my system's now strong enough, my mind is now stable enough to allow this to come forth, and it couldn't come forth before. I was holding it back. So I actually feel like something was driving me. I had a great job at home and everything, but it was like nothing. I had to I had to see, and I think what was driving me was the need for this to be released, so I could,
Got you. Yeah. Now, so that first trip to India, you didn't go to the KYM on that trip.
No, I was not ready for the KYM.
Yeah. Okay. So you came back and you you had to recover. And I mean, I only went for a month, but I don't know, when you throw yourself into the void like that, you went for much longer. You remove yourself from all the like external identifications about who and what you are. On some level, it's deep spiritual because you get to see what else is there besides those external identifiers. But at the same time, I had the same feeling even after a shorter time. I have to go have a life. I have to go make a life for myself. I can't stay here. Like I had the impulse, maybe I'll just stay here in India.
Yeah.
But it was like, no, I have to have a life. I have to go make a life.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think for me, it was more like I just need to stand up again.
Fair. I was in my 30s when I went. To be clear, my 20s, I did not have it together at all. So I completely understand. All right. So when you get back after you recover, do you still have an impulse towards yoga?
Oh yeah, definitely. So, I had to stop all physical practice for a while, but as soon as I was strong enough, that was the one thing, I was doing, which at that point was probably more Ashtanga, kind of slow Ashtanga. So after I got back, probably a year or so, about a year or so, I've got this job organizing tours to the Middle East.
Okay, because you knew the language?
Because I'd been there, I knew some Arabic, and because it was basically classical music tours to the Middle East, and I studied piano and violin classically so I was just kind of like fitted all the boxes. So I was sent back to Syria, back to Jordan, Yemen, Libya, Uzbekistan, Iran, kept being sent back to these Islamic countries by myself to just check them out and write a report and come back.
Listen to the music and stuff? That sounds awesome.
Yeah, and plan the historical and architectural and kind of cultural tours, basically. But obviously, I was still doing the yoga, and I think about a year after I got back, I discovered Jiva Mukti Center in London. Went to the Jiva Mukti place, and there a teacher played a kirtan. And even though I'd been in Rishikesh and all these places, and obviously I'd heard it, I was now ready to ask the question, what's that? And then I got back to I used to spend a lot of time in my office job Googling yoga stuff, and I like chant, kirtan. And then I quite quickly came across the word Veda, like Vedic chanting. And then came up Vedic chant teacher training with the Krishnamacharya Yoga Mandirum. It was the first ever teacher training they ran in Austria. And it was 4 2-week modules spread over 2 years. So I thought, I don't want to be a Vedic chant. I don't even know what Vedic chanting is. I'll just apply and, go to the first session, nothing lost, if I don't like it. So I turn up in Austria. I think I was 28, and I was the youngest person there. Most people were 50s, 60s. And, you had to go around and say, what your name is and what your background, and everyone's there. My name is, I've been in the Krishnamacharya lineage for 25 years, and my teacher is so-and-so, and I've been waiting for 20 years for this course to finally be running, and I'm so glad I'm here, And, I'm like, I actually don't even know who Krishnamacharya is. I've never been to a single I only do hardcore Jiva Mukti. Like, I'm hoping I'm going to like this. I don't know I just kept it minimal, what I said when I introduced myself.
Yeah, you didn't say that, did you?
I don't think I did. I said I haven't got a teacher. I'm not in the KYM.
I heard I know someone who may have been in that training with you because they talked about it when they started it, and it was a lot of people who had been there for a lot of years then participated in it, and you just kind of crashed the party.
I crashed it something, and because I think I'd done lots of yoga and my music background, you have to fill in quite a comprehensive, form to get in. Anyway, from the first second, it was Radha. So Menika did teach us, but not on that module. She was on the next module. So Menika is Desikachar's wife. And from the first second Radha started, it was kind of like my whole life reorientated around a principle that I didn't yet understand, like in an even deeper way. It had already, from the first yoga class, my whole life had reorientated, and now it was even stronger. And I knew I was absolutely in the right place. And that night they had all the Krishnamacharya books out. So his biography by Kaustaub the Yogi, read the whole thing that night. I mean, it's not that long, but the whole thing that night. Who is Krishnamacharya? Oh my goodness. And as part of that course, they taught you how to read the Devanagari, but over the 2 years. But my brain just went, I just got it pretty quickly. And then, I'm probably going on too much. I'll finish this point.
No.
But I was like, soon as that first module was over, I signed up to SOAS evening course, Sanskrit. I was like, this is what I need to know now. Like, I need to know not just how to read this, I need to know, understand this thing. Like, what is it?
Wow. So that's so awesomely cool to hear that story, because, I've heard other people talk about having an experience with sound, and I haven't studied Vedic chanting in the ways that you have, but I talked about going to Jivamukti and doing a kirtan with Krishnadas and having an experience with chanting, and like it having kind of a big imprint on me. And now in my 50s, I would say the chanting I do feels like maybe the most important part of my practice.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of time, and we can get to this, where, there was almost like a lot of taking of the chanting out. Like when I started in the early 90s, there was always chanting at Jivamukti, the beginning and the end of class. There was always chanting. But at some point, with all these conversations around appropriation and all these things that happened as things got like mainstreamed and stuff, a lot of us did at some point be like, is it cool for me to be a Westerner chanting? And there was all that. But the actuality of the practice of just doing it and the experience of sound is the thing. And there's something very powerful about that. And your entrance into it is sounds like why it feels important to me is sort of like, in the past, I would call it the devotional element, or it's like a certain space, but I never really thought of it as prayer. Like I never thought of it as prayer. Now I do. I definitely think of it as prayer. And I don't know if that's a word that you throw around. But I guess my curiosity here is you mentioned that you then go to study at SOAS. And it just seems to me that the way that you would study Sanskrit or text at SOAS is a very different thing than like this heart expanding sound resonance thing you're doing at KYM.
Yeah.
So did you do that simultaneously, or did you like finish your studies at KYM and then go to SOAS? Were they happening at the same time, or did you do them at separate times?
They were simultaneously happening, and what I'll say is, because that's just the beginning of the journey. So what I do now, I would say I don't do Vedic chanting. I do something called sounding. We'll explain what happened. I'll explain what happened in a minute. To get us to that point, but to carry on with your question, SOAS was helpful because it just gave me, a very quick dive into the external form of the grammar, which got me started. But through that, I met my first kind of real one-on-one teacher, Dr. Shastri, who was from a Sanskrit-speaking village in India, but spent half the year living in London, just down the road from where I was living. And he kind of gave a talk at SOAS, and I went to it, and it was just something about his light and the way he was speaking about Sanskrit. It was in his blood, and what was so extraordinary was his mastery of the English language, because Sanskrit is the mother of English. So when you understand the mother, his wit and brilliance just kind of like shone from him. And I remember going up to him like, I assumed he had come over from India. I said, how can I study with you? Well, I live in Hounslow. And I'm like, I live just down the road.
Lucky you.
So I spent 4 years and I would go to him. I would spend about 2 to 3 hours a session with him. And I really wanted to know what the Yoga Sutra meant. I knew that I couldn't know the Yoga Sutra without knowing more of the Sanskrit, So I would question him, and through that I was picking up deeper bits of the grammar, because you can't, look at meaning without looking at so many other things. And so that was really kind of opening me to something beyond SOAS and beyond the KYM.
Let me ask you about that. I saw that mentioned maybe in another interview that you did, but it said something about you having some questions that didn't get answered at KYM. I don't know if that's the way that you would phrase it, but what was it that you felt like, what was the limitation for you, or what was the, and let me say one thing before you answer, is that in the conversations I just recently had with the folks from the KYM, when I talked with them about chanting in particular, some of my questions there had to do with like pronunciation and getting it right. Yeah. And is it okay for someone to explore chanting? And they talked that they made some distinctions between different types of chanting and mantras, and like certain Vedic chanting, actually you do really need to get it right. But that there are other times where there's room for personal expression. And if intention and heart is there, it's worth quite a bit. So I guess for me, I guess I'm kind of curious about that. Like, one of the reasons I haven't studied it so strictly, because it is very strict or whatever, and potentially limiting. So I guess I'm curious, why is it that you didn't become a KYM teacher and you felt, and you ended up finding this other teacher to work with?
Well, and he's not the ultimate teacher, so he's just the prequel. But I'll stick with the prequel for now. I just knew there was more. And I was just following a scent, which I didn't know at the time. And that scent, took me to SOAS, and that then took me to Dr. Shastri, and I saw something in him. And I followed that set, and I could see what he was sharing about. I was also studying the Yoga Sutra with the KYM. I did like loads of courses, tons of courses with Kaustaub, obviously. Not going into that. Before his fall, I did a lot of 2-week in Austria Yoga Sutra study with him. So I was studying also there. I was kind of doing both simultaneously still at this point, because there wasn't the depth. There was a depth that I knew was there, and it wasn't being communicated to me, and I was following the scent.
Got you.
It will make more sense when I tell you about where
I think I know where you're going too. Well, like, that's interesting, because I guess you sort of sometimes feel a certain calling towards certain directions. And it does seem like a lot of what happens in that tradition for the people who I know who like, this is their thing. And I would say of all the traditions I've studied, it's the one I'm most inspired by for sure. Yeah. I mean, it's amazing. But a lot of times it had to do with like the relationship they had to Desikachar. Did you ever get a chance to study with Desikachar directly? Yeah, I did. I spent 2 weeks with him in India. I think that was a Yoga Sutra course the first time. And then I also in England did a pranayama course with him. Something else as well. But it was very much at the end of his time, I see. You didn't get to like have one-to-one interaction. I didn't have a one. No, I wasn't like a one-to-one, but I definitely. And I was going to say, did the stuff with Kaustaub and that kind of split, which we didn't really talk about. I didn't want to go there because we've talked about that kind of stuff on the show a lot. And, I've had people on to talk about that, and Gary using Vini Yoga and the whole thing. And, I don't think we need to like beat that horse or whatever. But I guess I'm curious, did you move on to other things before or after that happened? I mean, that was a huge part of my journey. It was a huge. Gotcha. I luckily was not. I mean, I can, already feel some emotion. I wasn't sexually abused by Kaustaub, just to make like it. But I believe that there was, there was some intense psychological things going on. I mean, and I have actually seen him since. I'm not holding I'm not his student still, but I'm not
saying a particular direction about how people should be to him. I'm just saying that my experience in the years up to 2012, which is when it all collapsed, I was seeing him multiple times a year, studying very intensely with him, and in the UK, and it's doing a lot. And he was brilliant. There was a brilliance and about him, absolutely, and is. And that collapse, I've actually written a whole chapter. It's called Hatha Yoga from Exile to Wholeness, which explains the whole story. It actually coincided with me being asked to leave the KYM.
You were asked to leave?
Yeah.
And is that something you can talk about?
Yeah. Probably, I don't want to get into stories so much, but that experience, I was dumped by my fiance the week before, but being asked to leave the KYM was the fiance was nothing compared to. I mean, obviously that's indicative of that relationship since someone else. But that absolutely floored me. I couldn't move for years.
Was that because you made waves or something? You pissed somebody off?
Again, I think I was starting to gain a lot of traction with what I was teaching with my sounding, and I was already not doing it in exactly the KYM way. Interesting.
And what all I would say to that, just from what we don't need to go there, but from what I observed is that there are a lot of people who studied closely with Desikachar and weren't supportive of Kaustaub becoming the heir, not even because of necessarily that stuff, even setting that aside for other reasons, and that things were way more individualized, and there was less of a system to it or something, or I don't know, there's less. It's not really a system. That's the thing about that approach. It is intended to be a one-to-one tradition that adapts to individual needs. So it sort of has that element to it, but in its teaching or in its application, it can have a lot of different expressions. And it seemed to me that maybe there was more room for that earlier on before Desikachar passed. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. There was all I know is that it was really tough for me because even though I was studying with Dr. Shastri and SOAS, my heart was with the KYM, absolutely, up until 2012. They had said, the yoga practice that I was doing, what I was experiencing through their yoga practice compared to the Ashtanga and the Ishtiva Mukti.
That's a good question, because you said earlier, and I had the same experience. I remember someone came during my teacher training from the Vini Yoga tradition, and I remember thinking, oh, this is totally boring, and I was very uninterested in it because I wanted way more intense stuff. But later on, years later, when I had all kinds of pain and could do all this stuff and still felt miserable, someone just had me inhale arms up and exhale arms down. It was this huge epiphanous moment.
Yeah.
So what was that for you? What was the transition from that harder edged physical practice to this simpler breath centered thing?
Well, that happened actually during the 2 years, the Vedic chant teacher training. So I was doing a fortnight every 6 months. So during that time, you did a practice, a vinyasa practice with them in the afternoon with sound. Now, the only way I could get through that practice was to have already done a 2-hour really full-on Ashtanga practice that morning. And then I was I burned
fed that beast first beforehand. Exactly. And also, just for people listening, not everybody knows this, that is a thing in Desikachar tradition where you do sounds instead of Ujjayi exhale, you use a mantra or something, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So because we were doing a Vedic chant course, so it was very much combining, the sound. And so, I was kind of forced to do these practices. I would never have gone to a class to do it, but I was, as part of, and how I started feeling like after those practices, was like this completely different flavor of like a silk gauze was kind of
silk gauze? Is that what you said? Ooh,
yeah.
I like that. I always say silky or smooth. I've used those words too. I know what you mean.
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
Just pervading, like this silk, as opposed to that kind of like, I don't know, the exhilaration or the endorphins or something that I would get from it was just a completely different flavor. And as I started like being able to attune to that flavor and recognize that flavor, it just, the Ashtanga and the Jivamukti just naturally fell away probably by the end of those 2 years. I think I remember going, to a Jivamukti with those head people of Jivamukti workshop, which I'd, been really looking forward to. And I just kind of, wasn't interesting to me. It just didn't have.
Once you get a taste for that Satva, you're like, you know what? I kind of like to live in the Satva realm more of the time.
Exactly. Yes. And the brilliance of, in watching Kaustaub's observation of people and and the practices he would give to people and you're seeing, and learning to observe how the particular sequence, if you do this, followed by this, the intelligence within that system far exceeds like after twist, do a forward bend. It's like I did the 3-year yoga therapy teacher training. I got thrown out just in the last month. So I did the whole training. I just don't have the certificate. So
got you. Which
was perfect in the end, which we'll get to that bit, but at the time obviously didn't feel perfect. But during that 3-year teacher training, therapy, I just learned to see the brilliance and intelligence and vast depth within the yoga practice in that tradition. And
the yoga chikitsa tradition is pretty. Yeah. What I would say is I've heard, like how multi-layered and complex, or how simple and between two people can vary again depending on like the person that it's coming through, but that program and all the stuff that you learn in the context of that program seems to me to be, again, that's the sort of school that I'm most inspired by for that reason that you're expressing. Yeah, absolutely. So, I'm so grateful to have had that experience. In the end, it's not my path to teach yoga therapy or to be a yoga therapist. My path is this path, but it's fed my personal practice so much to have that deeper understanding. Well, coming back to that, because you did mention that you studied with this teacher from SOAS, but I know, because I also listened to this other interview, that there's this other teacher that really seemed to me the big. Yeah. I only got his first name, Peter. I don't know who his last name was. Yeah. But maybe you could say something about who that person was and why that you point to that as seemingly one of your most, if not the most significant teacher. Yeah, the most, definitely. So 2012 happened, at which point I stopped having a teacher in the KYM. And I haven't had one since. So I've had no direct teaching or connection with the KYM since then. And actually, I think, and I can, it now makes sense, 12 years later, that it had to be severed from me, because I don't think I would have ever left. My path was not to continue with the KYM. But I may have persevered. If they had kind of, you be our teacher, you be our thing, it would have been very hard for me to say no, because it's so. You invested a lot of time and money and everything. Exactly. And it's so alluring. There was some part of ego there. Like if they're gonna, which they didn't, but if they had, you become the Vedic chant teacher, I would have said yes. I'm pretty sure. And then I wouldn't have kept searching and I wouldn't have found Peter. You see, so I had to be severed. Like, you are chucked out. And do you know what? And this is what's so extraordinary. The day I was chucked out was the day the whole lineage collapsed.
The next day, so that day I found
I wouldn't say it completely collapsed. There is remnants still, but I know what you mean. It all came out. I know what you mean. It certainly felt like that in the moment, for sure.
In the moment, oh my God, and for the year after. So thank God in a way that I was kicked out. And then like literally a few hours later, I got the message about someone had stood up and explained about Kaustaub, and it was like, wow, okay. It was it kind of helped, but it was still, the whole thing was, anyway, very challenging.
Interesting.
So, yeah, it was a big thing.
Those moments, those are like, is that coincidence? Is that convergence? Is that a divine intervention? A lot of different things you could attribute to it, but it doesn't seem like totally random.
No, yeah. I mean, it was just a lot of energies converging in one point. And I mean, I remember literally falling to the ground and unable, I literally couldn't stand up for days, just kind of looking at the computer, just like, in shock about the whole thing. So anyway, jump to 2000. A few months after that, however, I then met my now partner. And I kind of went on that adventure, and we got pregnant after 9 months, so quite quickly. So then I had a daughter, Athene. So it was kind of like, also, it was great that I was released from the KYM, because then I could just put all my energy into starting a family,
If you are hearing this message, then you're listening to the free version of J. Brown Yoga Talks. To hear the rest of our conversation, please subscribe to Podcast Premium at jbrownyoga.com/premium.